You habla inglés?
Yes, sir.
Have a license?
No, it's international driver license.
All right, tell me what happened. Are you hurt?
I didn't know the story had already been written until the officer looked at me and sighed. Not angry, not loud, just tired, like he already knew how this was going to end. That's the thing nobody tells you about moments like this. The crash isn't when your life tilts. It's when someone in authority decides who you are before you open your mouth. The highway outside Brookvale was frozen. Cars stopped like statues, steam rising from hoods, glass scattered like confetti nobody wanted, and red and blue lights painting everything in warning colors. I was standing there, hands still shaking, heart still pounding, trying to replay the last 10 seconds in my head when the officer said, "So you didn't see it coming?" I said, "Traffic stopped. I had nowhere to go." He nodded, but it wasn't agreement, it was dismissal, the kind that tells you facts are optional now. Behind him, another officer laughed with the other driver, clapped him on the shoulder, asked if he was all right. That's when it hit me, harder than the impact itself. This wasn't about the accident anymore. This was about assumptions, about shortcuts, about who looks like a problem and who looks like a mistake. And in that moment, standing on the side of the road, I realized something terrifying. I was no longer explaining what happened. I was defending who I was. To understand why bias creeps in, you have to understand how police are trained to survive chaos. Officers are taught to simplify scenes fast, identify threats, assign fault quickly, because hesitation can get someone hurt. On paper, that makes sense. In real life, it creates a dangerous habit. Pattern recognition replaces investigation. They're trained to ask, who's in control, who looks nervous, who doesn't belong, who's familiar. Those questions aren't always racist by intention, but they become racist in effect when familiarity is tied to skin color, accent, clothes, or body language shaped by fear. I watched it happen in real time. The officer with the clipboard focused on me, rapid questions, tight jaw, pen moving fast. Where were you coming from? Is this your car? Why are your hands shaking? Meanwhile, the other driver got open-ended questions, soft tone, room to talk. That's not policy. That's human bias layered onto authority. When police are under pressure, they default to what feels predictable. And predictability is shaped by culture, media, past arrests, and stories passed down in locker rooms, not always by data. The problem isn't that officers are evil. The problem is that shortcuts feel efficient, and efficiency can quietly replace fairness if nobody challenges it. Here's the part people hate hearing. Fear looks suspicious. Silence looks guilty. Handshaking look like lying, especially if you already don't fit the mental image of safe. I wasn't yelling, I wasn't resisting, I wasn't disrespectful, but I was nervous because I knew what being misunderstood could cost me, and that nervousness fed the story they were already telling themselves. When I corrected an officer, calmly, carefully, his posture changed. Authority doesn't like friction, even polite friction. He said, "So now you're telling me how to do my job?" I said, "No, sir, I'm asking for the camera footage." That sentence mattered, because bias thrives when nobody slows the process down. The moment I asked for evidence instead of mercy, the room shifted. The radios crackled more, the smiles disappeared, procedures replaced assumptions. That's the uncomfortable truth. Bias survives best when people don't know their rights. Once documentation enters the scene, bias loses oxygen. They pulled the footage. Highway cameras don't care about race, accents, or assumptions. They just record what happened. The video showed traffic locking up suddenly. It showed my brake lights already on. It showed the other vehicle coming in fast. No slowdown, no space left. Nobody said sorry. That's another thing nobody tells you. When you're right, the system doesn't apologize. It just moves on. The officer cleared his throat, handed back my license, said, "You're free to go." Free. Like I'd been detained by fate instead of judgment. But here's what made it a victory, not just an escape. I didn't win by being louder. I didn't win by playing the victim. I won by staying precise, knowing the law, and forcing the process to do what it's supposed to. And that's the lesson nobody wants, because it's not cinematic. Justice isn't automatic, it's procedural, and procedures only work if someone insists on them. I walked away that night exhausted, angry, relieved, and changed. Not because I hated police, but because I understood how easily power can drift when nobody questions it. Now here's where people split into comment section camps. Some will say, the other driver broke the law, end of story. Others will say, you were treated unfairly, that's the real crime. Both can be true at the same time. Breaking the law has consequences. Speeding, distraction, lack of documentation, those things matter, and they should. The law doesn't stop applying just because bias exists. But bias still poisons trust. When people believe outcomes depend on who they are instead of what they did, respect for the system collapses. And when respect collapses, compliance follows. That's how societies rot, not from chaos, but from quiet disbelief. So here's the question I want you to sit with. If you were standing there, lights flashing, heart racing, knowing you were being judged before being heard, would you know how to protect yourself without becoming the stereotype they expect? And for officers watching this, ask yourself honestly, how often do you let familiarity guide you more than facts? Because the law is supposed to be blind, not tired, not rushed, not human. But it is enforced by humans, and that means accountability runs both ways.